Hello, friends, and welcome back to Kari's Confessions, a nonprofit exec tells all. I'm Kari Anderson, principal with Incite Consulting, where I spend my days helping nonprofits build stronger boards, healthier organizations, and funding models that actually support the mission instead of exhausting the people doing the work. Yep, that's you. So I spent 25 plus years in the nonprofit sector in leadership roles with 7 organizations. Now I provide coaching and consulting services to ensure that nonprofits like yours have the structure, systems, and practices to do your best work. Wherever I go, I continue to hear that nonprofit execs need a space to gather, to receive tools, feedback, and advice that encourages them to stay the course. It doesn't matter if you're in a village of 182 or a metropolis of millions, nonprofit work is both gratifying and lonely. I'm here to make sure that you have a chance to breathe, to laugh, to smirk, and to get excited again about the important work that you do. So today, we're going to talk about why training pays back, the real return on investment on staff development. So during my time in the field and in my time consulting, I've had the privilege of working along nonprofit organizations across the country, right? First as an exec, now as a consultant, coach, facilitator, and what I jokingly call a professional people herder. If you've listened to this podcast for very long, you know that I spend a lot of time talking about building nonprofits from the inside out. Because here's what I've learned after working with more than 1,000 organizations. The organizations that make the biggest impact aren't necessarily the ones with the biggest budgets. They're the ones with the healthiest people. So today's episode is about something that can feel almost impossible when budgets are tight. Training, staff development, leadership coaching, board education, professional development. Whatever label you give it, I know that many of you are thinking, because I've heard it hundreds of times, Kari, we'd love to do training. We just can't afford it this year. And every single time I hear that, I think, I wonder if you can afford not to. So let's talk about that. I'm going to share with you a conversation that I will never forget. Several years ago, I was working with an executive director who was putting together next year's budget. Wonderful leader, like you, smart, mission-driven, working incredibly hard. We got to the line item for professional development. She looked at it, paused, looked at me, and deleted it. For a second, I took that personally. She said, that's $4,000 we could put into programming instead. Now, I completely understood her thinking. Every nonprofit leader wants every possible dollar going to the mission. That's why we got into this work. But I asked her one question. I said, what if investing in your people is investing in your programs? She stopped typing because she'd never thought about it that way. See, somewhere along the way, our sector started treating training like it's a luxury, like it's the dessert you order only after all the bills are paid. But I don't see it that way. I see training as infrastructure, just like accounting software, insurance, technology, strategic planning. It's one of those systems that allows your organization to do better work. And if we're honest, most nonprofits don't have a funding problem first. They have a capacity problem. So it's the hidden cost that no one budgets for. Here's what fascinates me. Every organization carefully budgets for salaries, hopefully benefits, office supplies, insurance, technology. But very few organizations budget for helping those people actually get better at their jobs. Instead, we hire someone. We throw them into the deep end. We hope they figure it out. Then 6 months later, we're surprised they're overwhelmed. Sound familiar? It was for me for years. I see this constantly. A phenomenal program manager gets promoted into a director role, not because they've managed people before, not because they've supervised staff, not because they've had difficult performance conversations, but because they were amazing at delivering programs. Then, 6 months later, everyone says, I don't know what's happened. They aren't leading very well. Well, of course they aren't. Nobody ever taught them how. Being great at your work and leading other people are two completely different skill sets. We wouldn't hire someone to manage our finances without teaching them accounting. Yet somehow we expect leadership to magically appear because someone got a promotion. Leadership isn't intuitive, it's learned. I'm going to share with you one of my favorite metaphors that kind of brings this together. So, one of the metaphors I use all the time with clients is this. Imagine you've bought a beautiful new truck. I'm a Montanan. I've got to say truck, right? You love it. It's exactly what you wanted. You need it for work every day. Would you ever say, you know what? Oil changes are expensive. Let's skip those. Of course not. Because you understand that maintenance protects your investment, right? Maintenance protects your investment. Yet somehow we do exactly that with people. We hire talented staff. We ask them to carry incredibly important work. Then we stop maintaining the very thing that makes the organization successful, the people. Eventually, the engine starts making funny noises. People burn out. Communication breaks down. Fundraising slows. Conflict increases. And then suddenly we're spending tens of thousands of dollars replacing someone because we tried to save $3,000 on developing them. That's not saving money, people. That's deferred maintenance. And let me address something else, the hero culture. There's another pattern I see all the time. I call it hero culture. Every nonprofit has one. I masqueraded as one for years. Maybe it's the executive director. Maybe it's the development director. Maybe it's the office manager who's been there for 15 years and knows where every password is hidden, and perhaps some organization skeletons. Everyone depends on one person, and that person quietly carries more and more and more. They become indispensable. Everyone says, we couldn't survive without Susan. Can I tell you something? That's not actually a compliment. That's a risk assessment. Because what happens if Susan retires, gets sick, moves, wins the lottery, gets recruited somewhere else? If one person leaving creates organizational panic, you don't have capacity. You have dependency. Training helps spread knowledge. It helps build systems. It develops future leaders. It creates confidence across the organization instead of concentrating it on one heroic individual. And that's a tremendous return on investment. So what does ROI really mean anyway? I want to talk about this phrase that we hear all the time, right? Return on investment. People immediately think money. Did we spend $5,000 and make $10,000? Sure, that's one way to look at it. But nonprofit ROI is different. Sometimes your return is in dollars. Sometimes your return is stability. Sometimes it's confidence. Sometimes it's retaining an employee for another 5 years. Sometimes it's avoiding one catastrophic board conflict. Wouldn't we all like that? Sometimes it's finally getting your fundraising committee to function like, well, an actual committee. Those things matter because nonprofits run on relationships. Your relationship with donors, board members, volunteers, partners, staff, community members. When your people become stronger, every single one of those relationships gets stronger too. That's real ROI. So let me give you a very practical example. A few years ago, I worked with an organization whose executive director admitted something during our first meeting. She said, Kari, our development director hates asking for gifts. I smiled because I hear that a lot. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't afraid of people. She simply had never been taught how major gift fundraising actually works. So together we built something incredibly simple: a donor pipeline, conversation strategies, stewardship plans, board introductions, role-playing, practice, lots of practice, because confidence comes from repetition, not inspiration. Over the next several months, something fascinating happened. The number of donor meetings increased. Follow-up improved. Board members started opening doors. Relationships deepened. And gifts started growing. Did training magically create money? No. Training created confidence. Confidence created conversations. Conversations created relationships. Relationships created generosity. See the difference? The money wasn't the first domino. The people were. And that's something that every nonprofit leader should remember. Whenever fundraising feels stuck, it's rarely because donors disappeared. Usually it's because systems disappeared, or confidence disappeared, or consistency disappeared. Training brings those things back. So whenever someone tells me we don't have enough money for staff development, I ask one question. What problem are you hoping magically fixes itself? Because almost every organization already knows where the friction is. Maybe it's new managers. Maybe it's fundraising. Maybe it's board dynamics. Maybe it's communication. Maybe it's accountability. You already know. The question isn't whether the problem exists. The question is whether you're willing to invest in solving it. Because here's the truth. Problems don't get cheaper with time. They get more expensive. And they almost never solve themselves. Thanks for spending part of your day with me. If you've enjoyed today's episode, I'd love it if you'd share it with another nonprofit leader who could use a little assistance. Be sure to find me on your favorite streaming platforms. And for more tips and tools, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at inciteconsultinggroup.com. Have a great week.